I have two foreign policy questions, two global solidarity questions for you. So first, before you go in the last couple of minutes, but I want to cover Middle East and Brazil.
Yeah,
Obviously, with Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and the denial of entrance to Israel, I don't need to really set it more than that. I mean, frankly, the question is that, and I think it's pretty clear from what you've already said what some of the answers will be. But how do you see being a voice, in Congress that really is about, in fact, democracy, justice, and human liberation and security and well-being for all in the Middle East? And I really underline for all, because obviously there is, in reality, not only no contradiction between wanting to uproot Jim Crow systems, this would enhance everybody's well-being and security if we had actual democratic function there. And so what does it look like for
absolutely.
you as a congressperson? I mean, will you support BDS as an example?
I was going to go there as my first point. In the service of expanding rights for all, I want to particularly defend rights of Americans and the First Amendment the attacks on First Amendment rights to participate in boycotts or divestment sanctions campaigns do threaten the rights of Americans, core fundamental constitutional rights, and the idea that we would trade our own rights in order to entrench a foreign proxy power that exports human rights violations, that is to some extent responsible for the militarization of our own police departments here in the United States, it is a perfect example of what Brother Malcolm described as our chickens coming home to roost. We have long been committed to lawlessness in the international sphere. And every time someone dies at the hands of a police officer in the United States, that usually you can trace that indirectly at least to paramilitary training, which disproportionately comes from Israel. And our military aid to that country, which we then leverage to, for instance, double down on our own authoritarian practices here, you might think about that as security laundering.
Yep.
And that's exactly what we've been doing with Israel for decades. The only thing I would say here about to broaden the context is that we should never sell weapons to countries that abuse human rights, period. That includes Saudi Arabia, right? I want to make very clear that this is not a matter of the identity of the country. It is about its practices. And any country that practices human rights abuses, we should not be supporting. Now, the irony here, of course, is that our own country for so long has been an engine of human rights violations. The CIA's litany of crimes include not only invasions and assassinations and mining harbors and removing democratically elected leaders across the global south. The CIA also has a hand in climate change, which we can get to. I suspect the question about Brazil might bring that into sharp focus. We have intelligence agencies that have, for decades, as we were warned by a former president they would do, that have been assaulting democracy in America, our own rights and liberties, and the resource opportunities for people around the world. So I would say that the fight to promote human rights, whether it's in Palestine, whether it's in Yemen, whether it's in Venezuela, ultimately has to take us through Langley. And we need an accountability, long overdue accountability for our own national security agencies in order to allow any meaningful sense for democracy or rights to emerge in other countries where they might be threatened.
All right. I'm synchronized. You've just watched a Michael Brooks show video, and you can watch all of our full main live shows every Tuesday night at around 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and subscribe to get all of the clips you want. We're covering the globe. We're focusing on international relations, the intellectual dark web. We're having fun. We're doing deep dives with a lot of amazing guests. Of course, become a patron for the whole thing at patreon.com/TMBS, or subscribe to this YouTube channel and help us keep growing and get that content out there. Subscribe below.